My parents chose my doctor over me when I told them he was poisoning me. So I cut them off and built my own case. 2 years later they're at my hospice bed apologizing because I'm dying at 19 from what he did. For 3 years I'd had the same doctor treating my autoimmune condition and the man had never shown physical affection beyond a pat on the shoulder. But then everything changed. He told me he was retiring early because his wife had cancer. He'd already arranged for my care to transfer to an excellent colleague. He gave me 6 months of refills instead of the usual 3. And when he hugged me at the door he whispered, "Stay strong, kiddo." 3 weeks later I was sitting in his old office, except it looked like a spaceship now. Everything warm and comfortable had been replaced with chrome and white surfaces. Dr. Nash was younger than my last doctor and intense in a way that made me uncomfortable. He spent the first appointment questioning everything about my treatment plan, calling it dangerously conservative and outdated. I tried explaining that I'd been stable for 2 years. But he pulled up lab results on his tablet showing my parents all these concerning trends my last doctor had apparently missed. My mom's face went pale as he pointed to numbers I didn't understand, talking about subtle inflammation and markers climbing and how we needed to optimize before permanent damage occurred. He wanted monthly appointments instead of quarterly. And when I protested he turned to my parents asking if they wanted to stick with outdated protocols. My mom had just returned to work full-time after years of managing my care and she looked relieved someone was taking charge. My dad, who normally let mom handle medical stuff, actually started asking questions about Dr. Nash's Harvard research. Over 4 months' drive Nash systematically changed everything. First my main medication got switched to a newer generation substance, then supplements for absorption, then anxiety meds for the stress of chronic illness. Each change brought side effects he called adjustment periods. I gained weight, my skin broke out, I couldn't focus during debate, which had always been my thing. He required weekly blood draws and hour-long appointments reviewing every detail of my daily symptom logs. My mom loved how involved he was and started telling everyone about this miracle doctor who was finally helping her daughter. When I said I felt worse she'd remind me Dr. Nash warned things might decline before improving. By senior year I was taking 12 different pills and seeing him twice a week. He'd started calling me his star patient and mentioning my case in his research blog without using my name. When graduation approached I begged for just 2 hours to walk with my class. I'd skip the parties and wear a mask and do whatever he wanted. But Dr. Nash reviewed my latest labs from his private clinic and got this concerned look. My inflammation markers were elevated and my white cell count was off. He recommended starting twice weekly 4 infusions immediately. When I asked to delay just 1 week he sighed like I was being difficult. He didn't explicitly tell my parents I couldn't attend graduation, but he made sure they understood the risks. My mom panicked about me collapsing during the ceremony and my dad, who rarely got involved in medical decisions, agreed we shouldn't take chances. I tried showing them research about stress and autoimmune conditions. But Dr. Nash smiled patiently and said he admired my initiative, but Google wasn't medical school. The night of graduation I sat in his clinic with an 4 in my arm watching Instagram stories of my classmates celebrating. I felt hollow, like something inside me had finally broken. 2 weeks later everything changed. During a routine infusion I developed severe stomach pain that made me double over. Dr. Nash's eyes lit up as he ordered emergency tests and I heard him tell a resident this could be publication worthy. That's when the doctor reviewed my medication list. She was young and careful, but I could see her frown deepen as she read. She mentioned some symptoms looked like medication interactions and reminded me patients had rights to second opinions. I tried to look into it, but getting my records became impossible. Dr. Nash's office claimed processing delays. Other doctors wouldn't see me without referrals. Insurance showed him as the only specialist in the network for 50 miles. Desperate I started researching his published studies and found a pattern. Dramatic patient improvement after initial decline, but suspiciously short follow-up periods. My best friend's mom worked at the medical library and helped me dig deeper. That's when I discovered Dr. Nash's breakthrough protocols all used specific substance combinations that weren't standard practice. The side effects matched mine perfectly. Through a patient forum I found Lily. She video called me saying she'd been waiting for someone else to figure it out. He created medication combinations that worsened specific symptoms while staying within prescribing guidelines, then reversed the damage with his own protocol, publishing only the recovery data. He owned shares in the specialty that compounded his medications and ran expensive retreats for desperate families. Lily had found other girls with identical treatment patterns, but the medical board just called him aggressive. As she explained everything, my bedroom door opened. My mom stood there with my packed hospital bag saying Dr. Nash had called worried about missed doses and wanted me admitted for inpatient treatment tomorrow. I had less than 12 hours to decide if I was going to fight this or disappear into his program. The ending changed everything for me. I locked the bathroom door and dumped my pills across the counter with shaking hands. 72 hours. That's what I needed to taper safely without seizures that would prove Nash right. My fingers sorted through the colorful capsules while Mom knocked asking if I was okay. I swept everything back into bottles and opened the door to find her holding admission paperwork. The voluntary commitment forms expired in 3 days, she explained, and Nash thought it best to act quickly. The kitchen table felt cold under my palms as we waited. Nash arrived 20 minutes later for our family meeting, setting his coffee mug directly on my college acceptance letter. The ceramic left a perfect ring stain on the paper I'd worked 4 years to earn. He mentioned casually that Maya had just started treatment with him for anxiety. My best friend hadn't told me. Nash smiled, noting how well she was responding to the same protocol that helped his other young patients. I tried to explain about the medication interactions, but a violent tremor seized my right hand mid-sentence. The timing was perfect. Nash had calculated my withdrawal symptoms down to the hour. My parents exchanged worried glances as I gripped my wrist, trying to stop the shaking. He leaned forward with practiced concern, suggesting we discuss this at the hospital where I'd be safe. Dad's face went gray during the argument. His hand pressed against his chest as his breathing turned shallow. He needed Nash's cardiac referral for his upcoming stress test, but I saw something shift in his eyes. My fear was real, and he recognized it even through his pain. Nash offered to call ahead to cardiology while simultaneously noting my agitation in his tablet. My sister's emergency anxiety medication sat in the cabinet above the sink. Nash had prescribed it after her first panic attack, which happened during one of my treatments at his clinic. I could take it to stop the tremors, but that choice felt like a trap. My hands wouldn't stop shaking and everyone was staring. I reached for the bottle. Nash's fingers flew across his tablet, documenting that I'd stolen controlled substances from a family member. The notation would go straight into my medical record, strengthening his case for involuntary commitment. But the tremors were getting worse, and I couldn't think clearly without something to calm my nervous system. The medication hit my empty stomach like acid. Within minutes I was hunched over the toilet, bringing up blood. My phone buzzed with a text from my boyfriend saying he couldn't handle the drama anymore. We were done. In the middle of everything, Lily called, her voice urgent. She'd found something about Nash's son, but the call dropped as I retched again. Cleaning blood from my face gave Nash time to show my parents the med stash he'd discovered in my room. I stared at the anxiety medications I'd never taken, planted evidence in bottles with my name. Mom's face crumpled as Nash explained how I'd been hoarding substances, probably selling them to other kids. The betrayal in her eyes cut deeper than any physical pain. Nash's tears looked genuine as he described another patient who'd refused treatment. She'd seemed so much like me, he said, independent and suspicious of help. Her parents found her body 2 weeks after she'd stopped taking her medications. His voice broke on the details, and I realized with cold certainty that he believed his own lies. My sister defended him while her eyes rolled back in an absent seizure nobody else noticed. The medication he'd prescribed made the scary feeling stop, she insisted, even as her brain misfired. I reached for her, but Nash smoothly stepped between us, suggesting she might need a dosage adjustment at our next appointment. The doorbell rang. A get well card from my aunt had arrived. And inside I could see the edge of a USB drive, Lily's evidence, but Nash positioned himself in the hallway discussing treatment options with my parents while blocking my path. Every time I shifted toward the door he moved with me, maintaining his position while never acknowledging the dance. My phone rang. The school counselor needed to discuss my medical situation. My college acceptance might be rescinded due to instability, but Dr. Nash graciously offered to write a letter explaining my temporary setback. His generosity made my mother tear up with gratitude while I watched my future slip away. Grandmother called next. Her pain medication refill required Nash's signature, and he'd mentioned concerns about substance-seeking behavior in our family. She needed those pills for her arthritis, so she spent 20 minutes pressuring me to cooperate with treatment. Her voice shook as she chose her physical comfort over her granddaughter's truth. Mom found my journal from 2 years ago, pages filled with praise for Dr. Nash during the honeymoon period when the doses were lower. My handwriting was shaky but genuine, talking about hope and healing and finally finding someone who understood. She read passages aloud while I tried to explain about medication-induced gratitude, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Nash's phone chimed. He'd posted my thank you video from last year to his professional Instagram. The one where I'd gushed about his life-changing treatment, filmed when the medications made me feel invincible. The hashtags read patient success and teen mental health. Comments poured in about what an inspiration I was. Mia's mother called my mom directly. I'd been harassing her daughter with anti-medication propaganda, she claimed, forwarding screenshots of texts warning Mia about Nash. She didn't know Maya had reached out first, begging for help after discovering her hair falling out in clumps. Nash had prescribed the same cocktail to my best friend, and now her mother thought I was the danger. The specialty pharmacy called about my refills. Nash controlled the only compound pharmacy in the state that could create his specific formulations. The pills had different markings than standard versions, custom mixed in his precise ratios. No other pharmacy could fill them, and without them the withdrawal would accelerate. During forced family therapy that afternoon, my dilated pupils from withdrawal looked exactly like substance abuse. The therapist took notes while Nash expressed concern about substance use disorders running in families. He mentioned my grandmother's pain medication needs and my sister's anxiety, painting a picture of genetic predisposition that made perfect sense to everyone but me. My ex-boyfriend's mother worked as a nurse at Nash's hospital. She called my mom with professional concerns about my documented lab results. The levels indicated serious interaction, she said, carefully suggesting perhaps a second opinion might help, but Nash had already explained away those numbers as evidence of my non-compliance with treatment. Sunday morning at church, conversation stopped when I entered the fellowship hall. The prayer group had been discussing my situation, and the pastor's wife mentioned they'd been praying for my family's strength. Nash attended the same church. I realized he'd been there longer, contributed more, earned their trust in ways I never could. Nash pulled out a timeline showing my decline matched perfectly with when I'd started dating my boyfriend. The correlation was clear on his charts. Lovesickness, not medication, had triggered my symptoms. My parents nodded along as he explained how teenage romance could destabilize chronic conditions. The fact that my boyfriend had just left me only proved his point. Mia admitted she needed Nash's ADHD prescription to maintain her 4.00 GPA. Stanford wouldn't accept anything less, and the medication helped her focus during late-night study sessions. She couldn't risk stopping now. Not when everything she'd worked for hung in the balance. I watched her choose her future over her health, understanding the trap Nash had set. Proving Nash prescribed dangerous combinations would mean revealing I'd been cutting pills in half, trying to reduce the doses myself. He'd frame it as manipulation, substance-seeking behavior, evidence of addiction. Every attempt to protect myself became proof of my instability in his carefully constructed narrative. Mom discovered my celebration text about finding others like me online. Nash explained how vulnerable teens were recruited into anti-medication cults, conspiracy theorists who blame doctors for their own failures to comply with treatment. The fact that I'd connected with other patients only proved I'd fallen into dangerous thinking patterns. The accusation came during dinner. Nash suggested I might have poisoned my sister to create symptoms that would discredit him. The words hung in the air while my family processed the possibility. We both knew only one of us would be believed, and he'd spent months ensuring it wouldn't be me. The next morning Nash arrived with my new therapist, a young woman who wore the same perfume his late wife had favored. She smiled warmly while explaining how my resistance to treatment concerned her. Nash sat beside her on our couch, their knees touching as she reviewed my case file. My mother served them coffee while I watched this woman barely older than me discuss my mental state with practiced authority. I remembered begging Nash for anxiety medication after my first panic attack 2 years ago. The memory felt different now, filtered through withdrawal. He remembered it differently too, describing how I demanded stronger doses, higher quantities. The therapist nodded sympathetically while making notes about substance-seeking patterns in adolescence. During our session she pulled out my college essay about finding hope through treatment. I'd written it during the honeymoon phase when Nash's medications made me feel invincible. The words praised him for saving my life, giving me back my future. She read passages aloud while Nash watched me with sad eyes. The essay would become evidence in my competency, hearing proof that I'd once understood the value of his care. My sister interrupted the session, whispering something to Nash about my special vitamins. She'd found the evidence. I'd been collecting samples of his tampered medications hidden in vitamin bottles. She didn't understand what she'd discovered, only that I'd told her not to mention my secret pills. Nash thanked her gently, promising to address this new concerning behavior. That night I stumbled through the house at 3 a.m. My body rejecting the minimal doses I'd managed to keep down. The home security system recorded everything: my unsteady gait, my confusion. What it didn't capture was Nash's assistant leaving through our back door an hour earlier. After adjusting my evening medications, the footage would show only my impairment, not its cause. The competency hearing arrived faster than expected. The judge reviewed my refusal to take prescribed medications as evidence of impaired judgment. Nash presented himself as a concerned physician trying to help a deteriorating patient. My parents sat behind him, united in their worry. Without proper legal representation, I could only watch as my autonomy slipped away through procedural motions. After the hearing I found the USB drive Lily had sent. The pharmacy tech evidence showed Nash prescribing medications under my name to other patients. My signature appeared on forms I'd never seen, authorizing treatments for people I'd never met. The tech had risked everything to document this pattern, but I needed someone who would listen. Nash's research presentation that week featured an anonymized case study everyone recognized as me. He discussed treatment-resistant teen psychosis, showing slides of my declining functionality. Colleagues nodded knowingly as he described the challenges of adolescent mental health. I sat in the back row watching him turn my poisoning into academic achievement. My therapist testified about our sessions, describing my discussions of feeling poisoned and not trusting anyone. She'd been required to document these statements, creating a record of paranoia that supported Nash's diagnosis. Her testimony felt rehearsed, each word carefully chosen to paint me as delusional while maintaining professional ethics. I attempted to record Nash during our next appointment. Hidden in my pocket, my phone captured him saying I needed to be worse before getting better. But the medical equipment in his office created interference, leaving only static where his confession should have been. Technology failed me when I needed it most. Another piece of evidence lost to circumstance. The crisis came when Mia texted about the triple dose Nash had prescribed. She was supposed to take it before her SATs. He'd promised it would ensure peak performance. I faced an impossible choice between attending my court hearing or racing to prevent her from taking pills that could trigger a cardiac event. Nash had orchestrated this timing perfectly. I chose Maya, found her in the school bathroom, pills already in her hand. I knocked them away, watching them scatter across the floor. She screamed at me about ruining her future, about needing those pills for Stanford. Security arrived as I tried to explain, and Nash's documentation of my unstable behavior gained another entry. The pharmacy tech who'd questioned Nash's prescriptions disappeared suddenly. Her family received a generous relocation package for an unexpected job opportunity across the country. Before leaving, she managed to send me one final message about threats to her children's school enrollment. The system protected those who stayed silent and punished those who spoke up. Nash redecorated his office with my original doctor's belongings purchased from an estate sale. He sat in a dead man's chair, prescribing the same combinations that had likely contributed to that death. The familiar furniture felt like mockery, a trophy of his expanding influence. I wondered how many doctors he'd replaced, how many practices he'd absorbed. During our next meeting, Nash offered me a fresh start. New identity, new state, his full support and recommendation to any college I wanted. All I had to do was admit I'd been lying, sign documents acknowledging my mental health issues, and submit to his treatment plan. The offer came with gentle threats about what would happen if I refused. My refusal triggered his next escalation. Nash suggested I showed signs of reproductive psychosis, a rare condition that might require surgical intervention. He spoke calmly about hysterectomy as a treatment option, noting how my symptoms aligned with this unusual diagnosis. My mother's face went pale, but she didn't interrupt his medical explanation. Alone in my room, I discovered something extraordinary. During lucid moments between doses, I'd been documenting symptoms in my phone's notes app without remembering. The timestamps proved Nash added medications before each decline, creating a clear pattern of cause and effect. My subconscious had been building evidence while my conscious mind struggled to function. Lily called with shocking news. She'd been taking placebos for months. Nash's head nurse had been secretly helping certain patients, switching their medications while documenting his crimes. The nurse couldn't save everyone without being caught, but she'd created a network of survivors who could testify if anyone would listen. Research into my previous doctor's death revealed the truth. His natural death from heart failure showed the same medication interactions Nash used, but the symptoms had been attributed to his age and stress. Nash had tested his protocols on the man who tried to protect us, eliminating him before taking over his practice. Mom faced an impossible realization. Believing meant accepting she'd let Nash medicate both her daughters unnecessarily. The weight of that potential failure made her double down on trusting him. She couldn't have failed us both, she insisted. Nash was helping. We were sick. Everything made sense if she just didn't look too closely. The mandatory reporter consequences terrified her more. If Nash had been harming us, she should have seen it. The law would hold her accountable for missing abuse signs. Easier to believe his version, where I was mentally ill and he was saving me. Her fear of legal consequences pushed her deeper into denial. I presented video evidence to a social worker showing my previous seizure with a clear medication timeline. The social worker took notes but explained the process would take months. Nash was respected, established, published. I was a teenager with documented mental health concerns. The system moved slowly when challenging those with power. At the hospital for blood work, I encountered Nash's ex-wife. She was the woman I'd been trying to contact for months. Her hands trembled as she touched mine, sliding a folder under my purse. Inside were her son Tommy's medical records, the evidence I'd needed to understand Nash's motivation. Nash's deleted research videos surfaced through a technical error. They showed him documenting subjects' decline with excitement, discussing how their deterioration proved his theories. He'd filmed children suffering while narrating their symptoms like a nature documentary. The videos revealed a man who saw patients as data points, not people. My previous doctor's son contacted me about a wrongful death suit. He had evidence about his father's final months, the medications Nash had recommended, the symptoms everyone had missed, but he needed me to testify against my own parents, acknowledging they'd failed to protect me. Another impossible choice Nash had orchestrated. The crisis escalated when I missed my sister's seizure. I'd been managing both cases, gathering evidence, trying to protect everyone, but exhaustion and medication made me miss her emergency. She ended up in the ICU while Nash personally adjusted her for ensuring her treatment aligned with his protocols. I sold everything valuable I owned to pay legal fees. My laptop, jewelry, the car I'd saved for since middle school. Meanwhile, Nash billed insurance $50,000 monthly for complex case management. The financial disparity felt crushing. He profited from our suffering while I emptied my savings trying to stop him. Confronting Nash in the hospital corridor led to a restraining order. He documented my aggressive behavior, my harassment, my refusal to accept treatment. The order complicated my ability to protect my sister, keeping me away from the ICU where she needed advocacy. Legal protection worked only for those who knew how to use it. My part-time job ended when my boss faced liability issues. My medical condition created too much risk, she explained apologetically. She'd already hired my replacement, who happened to be the daughter of one of Nash's patients. Another connection in his expanding network, another way he controlled my options. Living in my car outside the hospital became my only option. I watched my sister's room from the parking lot, noting who entered and when. Nash had security patrol for the stalker he described in his reports. They moved me along every few hours, but I always returned, needing to stay close. Dad's breaking point came when Mom overdosed. She'd taken a bottle of my pills. The ones she'd insisted were helping me. The irony felt sharp as paramedics rushed her away. Dad begged me to stop Una, leaving my mother, his words heavy with exhaustion and blame. He couldn't see that Nash had orchestrated this too. My accusations finally reached the right ears. Lily's parents demanded an investigation before accepting Nash's treatment for their daughter. They'd been ready to commit her based on his recommendation, but my evidence made them pause. Lily's last text simply said they were listening now, the first hope I'd felt in months. The investigation revealed cracks in their marriage. Lily's father discovered her mother had known about Nash's experimental protocols but stayed silent for the promised results. Their trust shattered as they realized they'd both been willing to sacrifice their daughter's safety for the promise of fixing her. I continued gathering evidence while watching Lily deteriorate on Nash's intensive protocol. Her parents' investigation moved slowly through proper channels while their daughter faded. The system that protected doctors couldn't move fast enough to save patients. I documented her decline, adding to my growing files. Mia's question haunted me during a brief moment of clarity. What if we were the crazy ones? She asked. Nash's treatment actually helped her focus, made her feel capable. Maybe we were wrong to resist. I watched clumps of her hair fall onto her textbook as she spoke, but she didn't seem to notice anymore. Desperation drove me to steal Nash's prescription pad during an appointment. I slipped it from his coat while he discussed my deterioration with the nurse. Using it, I forged prescriptions for my parents' evaluation, trying to force the system to examine their fitness. The forgery would become evidence of my criminal behavior, but I had no other options. Hospital records revealed the true timeline of my illness. My liver damage had started before Nash, but his treatment accelerated at 400%. I'd been sick. He just made it catastrophically worse. The evidence felt vindicating and heartbreaking. I'd never been healthy, but I could have had years instead of months. Nash challenged my lawyer's competency, citing their mutual patient history. They'd both been treated by him years ago for different conditions. The conflict of interest forced recusal, leading me to find new representation. Every potential advocate seemed to have some connection to Nash's expanding influence. His true beliefs emerged during a recorded session. Nash genuinely thought he was pioneering treatment for modern teenage neurological dysfunction caused by technology. He saw himself as a visionary fighting an epidemic others couldn't recognize. His delusion made him more dangerous than simple greed would have. The revelation about his son Tommy explained everything. Nash's child had died from a rare disease despite his father's desperate interventions. Now Nash tried to save other children through the same radical protocols that had failed his son. We weren't patients to him. We were chances to rewrite his greatest failure. Maintaining my cover required taking minimal doses of Nash's cocktail. I documented the effects, watching my own hair fall out in chunks, feeling my liver struggle with each dose. The evidence I gathered came at the cost of my own body. Each metat trade between proof and survival. My transformation disturbed me. The sweet teenager I'd been learned manipulation from watching Nash. I used his techniques against him, playing roles to gather information. Fighting him required becoming like him. A change that felt like another kind of poisoning. The evidence I needed came through seduction. Nash's young resident had access to restricted files. I made myself attractive to him. Endured his attention, stole his key card during an intimate moment. The violation felt layered, using my body as a tool while my mind screamed. But I got the files. My victory in getting Nash's privileges suspended felt hollow when his daughter attempted sewer slide. We sat in the same emergency room we'd both haunted for different reasons. She'd lost her father to his obsession with saving children, while I'd lost my health to that same obsession. Neither of us had won. Nash's malpractice lawyer argued my harassment campaign had caused his mental breakdown. The legal system saw a respected doctor driven to distraction by a disturbed teenager. My evidence looked like obsession, my documentation like stalking. Nash's colleagues testified about his dedication while minimizing concerns. Everything depended on Lily testifying, but Nash's revolutionary treatment protocol had left her catatonic. She lay in a bed 2 floors above the courtroom, unable to speak about what he'd done. Her silence served Nash better than any testimony could have. The star witness existed in name only. Nash's daughter left me a voicemail that shattered my anger. She spoke about her daddy, saying I was sick, like Tommy was begging me to let him help. Hearing the dead son's name in her voice made me understand Nash's delusion completely. He wasn't evil. He was insane with grief, trying to save his son over and over through us. Hospital staff testified about Nash's generous research grants while patients suffered in the hallways. Money flowed to studies and equipment while families bankrupted themselves paying for treatments. The institution protected its benefactor, valuing his funding over our lives. Economics trumped ethics in their calculations. The prosecutor explained why they'd charge reckless endangerment instead of attempted unalived. Systematic harm was harder to prove than single incidents. Juries understood one-time violence but struggled with slow poisoning through medical care. Nash would face lesser charges because his crimes were too complex for simple categories. My previous doctor's colleague finally provided crucial records. They showed Nash had reported the older doctor for negligent care before taking his patients. The pattern was clear. Nash destroyed other doctors' reputations before absorbing their practices. But the colleague wouldn't testify, fearing for his own career. The records revealed my original autoimmune condition had been mild, possibly psychological. Nash had made it real through his treatments, creating the illness he claimed to cure. The irony felt sharp, knowing I'd been turned into the patient he'd insisted I was. My body now matched his diagnosis. The previous doctor's notes arrived through his son the next morning. Pages of careful observations documented how he'd suspected Nash but feared losing his medical license for making unfounded accusations. My predecessor had chosen reputation over patience, a decision that haunted his final months. The handwriting grew shakier as his health declined, matching the medication interactions Nash had orchestrated. I found the final evidence in Nash's son's medical records. Tommy Nash had been his father's first experiment, tested with the same radical protocols now destroying us. The boy's autopsy showed experimental medication interactions ruled natural due to his underlying disease. Nash had unalived his own child trying to save him. The realization hit me physically. Nash genuinely believed he could have saved Tommy with just the right combination. The perfect protocol. Now he tried saving his son over and over through us. Each patient another chance to rewrite history. We weren't people to him. We were divers for his greatest failure. I used Tommy's records despite knowing it would destroy Nash's remaining sanity. The choice felt cruel, but 8 other children deserved justice. Their families needed answers about why their kids had deteriorated under Nash's care. My hand shook as I photocopied death certificates, each one showing the same pattern of organ failure. Nash's published data revealed the full scope when I cross-referenced it with obituaries. He'd cherry-picked survivors for his studies, ignoring 6 deaths including Tommy. 7 dead children hidden in footnotes and selective reporting. The evidence had been there all along, buried in academic language and statistical manipulation. The confrontation happened in his office. I spread Tommy's records across his desk while Nash rocked in his chair, whispering his son's name repeatedly. His professional mask cracked, completely revealing a father destroyed by grief. I almost stopped, but Maya's latest blood work showed kidney damage. The living still needed protection from his delusions. Other families started connecting the dots. Parents who'd lost children to mysterious complications after Nash's treatment began comparing notes. They realized their kids had been replacements for Tommy Nash. Treated with protocols that had already failed once the pattern became undeniable when laid out chronologically. Nash's ex-wife filed a wrongful death suit for their son. She'd stayed silent for years, but my evidence gave her courage to acknowledge what her husband had done. The legal filing forced the hospital to suspend Nash pending investigation. His research funding froze overnight. Criminal charges followed within days. The prosecutor built a case around 8 dead children, presenting evidence methodically while Nash drew molecular structures on his legal pad. He'd retreated completely into his delusions, sketching chemical compounds that might have saved Tommy if only he'd tried them sooner. Nash's head nurse testified about switching medications for certain patients. She'd saved 12 lives by secretly replacing his cocktails with placebos, documenting everything while appearing loyal. Her testimony revealed a network of medical staff who'd suspected but felt powerless to act directly. The judge ordered Nash's immediate psychiatric hold after hearing expert testimony. A toxicologist confirmed Nash's protocol would have lived me within 6 months, slowly enough to seem natural. The systematic living through medical negligence shocked even experienced legal professionals. Evidence proved Nash believed he was curing us while poisoning us to death. His complete break from reality became apparent when he started talking to Tommy during proceedings, promising other children they'd meet his son soon. The man who terrorized us was revealed as profoundly mentally ill. The prosecutor asked if I wanted the maximum sentence. Nash's daughter sat in the gallery, tears streaming as she watched her father's complete breakdown. I requested psychiatric treatment instead of prison, recognizing he needed help, not punishment. He was sick like his patients had been, just in a different way. My parents began court-mandated therapy to process their role in enabling Nash. The sessions forced them to confront how they'd prioritized his authority over my deteriorating health. Mom couldn't make eye contact during our supervised visits, but Dad started asking questions he should have asked months ago. Grandmother took me in during the evaluation period. Her arthritis made caring for me difficult, but she'd chosen family over her pain medication access. We spent quiet evenings sorting through medical records, her weathered hands organizing evidence of Nash's crimes. The community divided between those who'd missed warning signs and those who'd reported concerns. The hospital held a memorial service for treatment complications, carefully avoiding admission of liability. 8 small photos lined the altar. Children whose parents had trusted Nash's expertise. Lily spoke for the first time in months at our support group meeting. Her voice came out raspy from disuse, but she managed to describe the terror of being trapped in her own body. 11 other survivors attended, all showing various stages of recovery from Nash's protocols. The state fast-tracked emergency protections, requiring 2 physicians' agreement before prescribing psychiatric medications to minors. The legislation felt hollow compared to our losses, but it might prevent another Nash from operating unchecked. Small victories mattered when bigger ones seemed impossible. Mia's kidney function stabilized after months of dialysis. She'd lost her Stanford admission but gained perspective on what mattered. We sat together during treatments, comparing scars and sharing dark humor about our matching medical trauma. Neither of us would fully recover, but we'd survived. My liver damage proved permanent. Specialists confirmed I'd need a transplant within 5 years, assuming I qualified. The medications Nash had forced on me had aged my organs by decades. I faced a shortened lifespan because someone couldn't accept his son's death. Nash remained in the psychiatric facility, still believing he could cure death itself. His daughter entered intensive therapy to process how her father had lived her brother, trying to save him. She sent me one letter asking if I hated him. I wrote back that I pied him, which felt more honest than forgiveness. The other families pursued individual lawsuits against Nash's estate and the hospital. Settlements would never restore their children, but the financial compensation might prevent similar tragedies. Money felt inadequate compared to lives lost, but it was all the system could offer. I dedicated my remaining years to preventing medical abuse. Speaking at conferences from my wheelchair, showing my failing body as evidence of unchecked medical authority. Each presentation exhausted me, but parents listened when I described the warning signs they'd missed in their own children's treatment. 6 months after the trial, I watched Nash's treatment center close permanently. Sitting in my mobility aids oxygen tank at my side, I observed workers removing his name from the building. My body bore the permanent cost of his delusions. Liver failing, kidneys struggling, but my mind remained clear. My parents attended every therapy session, slowly rebuilding trust through actions rather than words. They'd never fully forgive themselves for choosing Nash's authority over my well-being, but they showed up consistently. Dad researched my condition obsessively, trying to understand what he'd missed before. 8 families formed a foundation in their children's names, funding oversight for experimental psychiatric treatments. Board meetings felt surreal. Parents bonding over shared loss while planning prevention strategies. We couldn't bring back the dead, but we could protect the living. Lily learned to walk again through months of physical therapy. Her motor functions returned slowly, each step of victory over Nash's protocols. She started studying patient advocacy, determined to be the voice she'd needed. During her catatonic months, the medical board reviewed Nash's entire patient roster, finding dozens more affected to varying degrees. Some had recovered after stopping treatment. Others showed permanent damage. The full scope of his crimes took months to document properly. I spent my final mobile months creating detailed guides for recognizing medical abuse. Writing became difficult as my motor control declined, but I dictated when my hands failed. The work gave purpose to my shortened life, transforming trauma into prevention tools. Nash's research disappeared from medical journals as publishers retracted his studies. Years of fabricated data vanished from the scientific record. His contributions revealed as elaborate deceptions. His legacy became a cautionary tale about unchecked authority in medicine. My sister recovered more fully than I did, her younger body bouncing back from Nash's assault. She struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering why she'd escaped the worst damage. I reminded her that her survival was its own victory, not something to apologize for. The support group expanded to include family members processing their complicity. Parents faced hard truths about prioritizing convenience over children's well-being. These sessions felt raw, full of accountability and grief, but necessary for real healing. I marked my 19th birthday in the hospital, surrounded by 4 poles and monitoring equipment. Friends from the support group brought sugar-free cake, understanding my dietary restrictions. We celebrated survival rather than traditional milestones. The prosecutor sent updates about Nash's condition. He'd been diagnosed with delusional disorder, spending days writing treatment protocols for Tommy. His break from reality appeared complete and permanent. The man who terrorized us had become trapped in his own mental prison. My final months involved teaching other survivors to advocate for themselves. From my hospital bed, I video called into medical appointments, coaching patients through confronting their doctors. Each successful advocacy felt like reclaiming power Nash had stolen. Local medical schools started including our case and ethics courses. Students learned about the dangers of unchecked authority through our suffering. Guest lectures exhausted me, but reaching future doctors felt crucial for systemic change. Nash's daughter graduated from therapy and started speaking publicly about losing her brother twice. First to disease, then to their father's inability to accept death. Her courage in sharing their family's destruction helped other relatives of perpetrators process complex grief. I filled journals with advice for young patients facing aggressive doctors, simple phrases for asserting boundaries, questions to ask about medications, red flags to recognize. The pages would outlive me, offering protection I'd wished for during my ordeal. Maya finished community college despite her health challenges. She'd abandoned dreams of Stanford but found purpose in disability advocacy. We joked about our matching medical alert bracelets, finding humor in our permanently altered lives. The final family therapy session included apologies I'd needed to hear. My parents acknowledged specific failures, naming each time they'd chosen Nash over me. The words didn't erase damage but offered closure before my transplant window closed. 8 memorial benches appeared in the hospital garden, each bearing a child's name and dates. Families gathered there monthly, sharing updates about prevention efforts. The space became sacred, transforming institutional grounds into a place of remembrance. My last clear memory involved watching Nash's former office become a patient advocacy center. Lily cut the ribbon from her wheelchair while I managed weak applause. The room that had terrorized us now served those needing protection from medical abuse. 6 months later, everything had changed. My liver finally failed beyond intervention. I spent my last conscious days surrounded by survivors who'd become family. Parents who'd failed me worked tirelessly on prevention legislation. 8 families pursued justice for children whose deaths had been dismissed as tragic complications. Lily could walk unassisted, now studying to become the advocate she'd needed. Nash remained institutionalized, drawing molecular structures and talking to his dead son. His daughter found peace accepting her father had unalived her brother, trying to save him. From my hospice bed, I watched the patient protection bill pass, requiring multiple physicians to approve psychiatric medications for minors. It wasn't enough, would never be enough, but it was something. 8 children had died before anyone listened. I'd die young from Nash's poison, but not silently. The support group had grown to 30 members. Survivors helped each other navigate recovery while families processed their complicity. My parents had become fierce advocates, channeling guilt into action. They'd failed me but wouldn't fail others. I thought about Tommy Nash often in those final days. The first victim of his father's grief-driven delusion. We'd all been attempts to resurrect him. Each failure driving Nash deeper into madness. Tommy's death had unalived us all in different ways. My body bore witness to medical abuse. Failing organs testified to the danger of unchecked authority. But my mind remained clear enough to see change beginning. Slow institutional change that might prevent another Nash.